Leagues 5 was perfect. Almost. I'm Paper Thomas, and now nearing Dragon rank myself in this leagues and have obtained Dragon rank in the leagues prior, I finally felt as though I've played enough of this leagues to generalize my opinion. I did release videos beforehand, as well as within the first week, giving my thoughts about it, so this is just to wrap it all up in a sweet little bow. Firstly, this leagues made a lot of accommodations which I thought were perfect for the health of the leagues. Of course, the biggest one was the fact piece drops such as the Dragon Shard and the Dragon Chunk dropped the plate body and the shield instead. But there was a problem with this in that not every one of those upgraded drops filled the collection log for the piece that it replaced. There are some things that did make this exception to the rule, but I know when I got my Dragon plate body, I almost let it despawn because I didn't realize I wasn't going to get a collection log slot, which was what I was listening for. But smaller things that they accommodated us for were like box traps in the Lumbridge General Store. These are things that would be very difficult to obtain, if not impossible otherwise. Those are little accommodations that went a long way for a lot of people. Tasks, though. This leagues compared to last leagues, I thought they did a phenomenal job in trying to make every task as accessible to everybody in the game as possible. Because in previous leagues, if you played prior, there was crazy KC tasks and crazy do this thing this amount of times tasks, which they really dialed back this leagues, which I thought was amazing. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was the first leagues that there's actually people who have completed 100% of the tasks available to them. You have to remember we're talking about Jagex here, so respecting time isn't really the primary concern, but all things considered, this is the most that they've respected the time of the players who are interested in pursuing as close to 100% as they can. Just a few examples of those tasks for anybody that picked the desert region. Pyramid Plunder last leagues had a KC task for 150 room 8s compared to only 25 this leagues. The 150 last leagues, I remember when I was doing that, I didn't even do any of the urns. I didn't loot any of the urns because I knew, I calculated it out. The amount of experience I would get from the doors and the grand chest at the end was enough for me to just get over 99. And then Theater of Blood, that went from 250 KC down to 100. There are still bad tasks that exist in my opinion. Things like kill 300 tormented demons and kill 300 of each Dagonoth kings. I have a philosophy on what makes a good task. You only want somewhat moderate to high KC requirements for endgame content that has a lot of other tasks speckled in with it. So for example, Theater of Blood, 100 is perfect for it because there's also tasks for full Justiciar. There's the task for the Avernic Defender, for the Sanguinesti staff. So it's an endgame piece of content that has a moderate KC requirement, being 100, but then there's a whole bunch of other tasks scattered in to fill in while you're doing those 100 KC. If they did 100 Scurious, that's just overkill because that's not endgame content that you need to be doing. And there's only the one drop being the Scurious Spine, excluding the pet. So I think the 300 Dagonoth Kings does not meet that requirement because you're already going to have everything you need by 100 KC, most likely. So to force you to push it to that 300, and the same with Tormented Demons, except for on my alt, which went to 315 KC to get the first Synapse, where my main did 300 KC and got 8 synapses, but that's just RuneScape RNG. I do believe there is discussion to be had about removing or somehow mitigating the severe RNG checks. The ones that come to mind are the Magic Seed from Bird's Nests and the Kebab from the random events. The Magic Seed was one that plagued me last leagues as well. I did hundreds of Bird's Nests and I never got one. The Kebab, thankfully, I got, but a cold one, if you don't know, is a RuneScape YouTuber who went towards the max, and he has every task completed in leagues except for the Kebab, and throughout his entire playthrough he's been trying to get it, but just RNG kept saying no because of how rare, one, the random event is, and then two, the chances of getting the Kebab from it. So I think stuff like that either needs to be altered or removed entirely. Equipped a piece from the Mime outfit, that's no big deal because that just means you just need to get one and you're virtually guaranteed to get a piece when you get that event. So those ones aren't an issue, but the Kebab one is. The last thing I want to say about tasks is they need to remove the incompletable global tasks. These piss me off because they mean that you can't do it. It doesn't matter. You cannot invest enough time because they are physically impossible. And why is Western Diaries, which you need Kandarin for, and only Kandarin for, why are those in global? That doesn't make sense. Please remove those because they just watch over you. If anything, for some of the tasks that need multiple regions, maybe those should only unlock when you have access to both the regions. Mind-blowing concept, I know. Echo Bosses was another awesome addition to this leagues, as I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks that. The only problem that I have with the Echo Bosses is because of the progression system within leagues being exponential, that your first Echo Boss experience is going to be more memorable than any of the other ones. But I know from my personal experience, I went to Dagonoth Kings first, and I was under-leveled. I did not have a 2-tick weapon. And I died many times, but I had a blast learning and trying to perfect this to be one of the first people to kill that boss. Then I went to KQ after being significantly more powerful, and I mollywopped there. Regarding the Echo Bosses though, the Echo drops were not balanced enough in my opinion, in the sense that there were some drops that had more utility or constant utility throughout your playthrough, whereas other ones dropped off relatively quickly. I think the biggest example of this would be the Fremi jewelry. Those are things that would apply to you throughout your entire playthrough. I didn't even wear a salve amulet for the most part because having the Slayer helm buff with the Fremi jewelry was just too powerful. So that was one where you were almost required to take the Fremi region. Likewise, the Crystal Blessing just created a general buff, but it also meant that you always had to be wearing crystal armor, which kind of limited your play style. Going the weaponry route, which the only thing I did was, in my melee build, I went for the Drygore Blowpipe, because that was one where, being a melee build, having a 1-tick, double accuracy rolling blowpipe, I think that was the best setup in my opinion. Having access to that was more fun than I could imagine having a 3-tick Bofa would have been. But that's my opinion for the Echo Bosses. I hope they tone down the items that have constant use so that Echo items almost feel like an intermediary before the endgame content. Or is it supposed to be endgame content? The fact that it was kind of like mixed half and half, yeah, it didn't really sit too well with me. Combat masteries, I think, were a phenomenal addition to this league's. Hands down, ranged was the most powerful. I made a range alt just so I could experience it for myself, and it was extremely fun being able to use range in areas that you normally aren't supposed to be able to use range. All range TOB, all range nightmare, like that's just funky stuff that normally shouldn't work. But in the Raging Echoes League, going anything other than the mastery that gives you echoes, I think kind of does it a little bit of disservice. So my main was melee build. With that being said, I think melee, although being loads of fun, was extremely underwhelming. The echoes were extremely disappointing in my opinion. They just didn't feel like they had enough impact. I had more fun with the Noxious Halberd than I did with the Scythe, even though the Scythe had a better chance of generating the echoes. And equally disappointed, I felt as though the healing, the passive healing for melee, just absolutely stunk. I was still dying to things that I shouldn't have been dying to just because the health wasn't activating. It wasn't proccing. So I think in the future, maybe healing, if it has like a guaranteed passive, if they tone it down drastically, just like how they had with range, it says, hey, every 5th hit, it's going to heal whatever you deal or something like that. I think that would be a better route because it almost felt like the healing passive for melee was completely irrelevant. Even with that being said, the combat masteries was just such an awesome addition. I hope that they incorporate it in some manner in the future. The saddest part about any league is watching the world progressively get emptier and emptier. Just seeing so many goblins running around Lumbridge, and you're like, maybe it shouldn't be this many anymore now that the player count is dwindling. It's just one of those things where it just reminds you, for somebody that intends on playing later into the leagues, that you're slowly dwindling to I have enjoyed leagues thoroughly. I hope you guys did as well. I hope you guys obtained whatever you were aiming for, as I know some people get locked down on RNG checks. I know I'm still trying to get that frickin' magic seed from the bird's nest. And as always, I'm looking forward to the next one already. Thank you for watching. I'm Paper Thomas, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. And I already know you want to see what was in those clues. So, as a little bonus, here's a little montage.